There are moments in life when everything looks normal on the outside, but deep within, something is shifting. A quiet urgency, a whisper in your spirit that says, "Don't ignore this, not this time." Tonight, I don't stand before you by accident, and you are not listening by coincidence. Because there are seasons when God comforts, and there are moments when God warns. Not to scare you, but to save you. Not to condemn you, but to call you back closer than ever before. I want to tell you a story. There was a man who felt a sudden burden to pray. Nothing dramatic had happened yet. No crisis, no visible storm. But deep in his heart, he could not shake the feeling. He delayed. "Tomorrow," he said, "I will pray tomorrow." But tomorrow came with news he never expected, and a weight he was not prepared to carry. Listen carefully, because this is where many people miss their miracle. God does not always shout. Sometimes He nudges. Sometimes He stares. Sometimes He places a holy agency in your spirit. And what you do in that moment determines what happens next. I feel it strongly tonight. There is an agency in the spirit. This is not just another message. This is not just another gathering. This is a divine interruption. God is calling you right now, not later, not when it's convenient, not when everything falls apart, but now, while there is still time to respond, because there are prayers that must be prayed today. There are battles that must be fought on your knees tonight, and there are breakthroughs that are waiting on your obedience in this very moment. So I ask you, don't harden your heart. Don't delay what God is stirring inside you, because this could be the prayer, the moment, the turning point that changes everything. There are moments in life when God speaks, not through thunder or spectacle, but through a quiet, persistent stirring deep within your spirit. It doesn't always come with visible signs. There may be no immediate crisis, no obvious danger, no dramatic change in your circumstances. Everything can appear stable on the surface, yet inside there is an unexplainable agency, a gentle but firm prompting that refuses to be ignored. This is often how God begins to warn His people. Many expect God's warnings to come in overwhelming ways, but more often they are subtle. A sudden burden to pray for someone you haven't thought about in years. A deep sense of unease when everything around you seems perfectly fine. A repeated thought that calls you to pause, reflect, and turn your attention back to God. These are not random feelings. They are spiritual signals. They are invitations from God to align yourself with His timing before something unfolds. The challenge is that human nature tends to dismiss what it cannot immediately explain. When there is no visible problem, we convince ourselves there is no need for urgency. We delay, we rationalize, we say, "I'll pray later," or "I'll take it seriously tomorrow." But spiritual sensitivity requires us to move beyond what we see and trust what God is revealing beneath the surface. Because by the time something becomes visible, the window for preparation may already be closing. God's warnings are acts of mercy. They are not meant to create fear, but to provide opportunity. Opportunity to pray, to change direction, to intercede, and to prepare. When God places a burden on your heart, it is because He is allowing you to participate in what He is about to do. He is giving you a chance to respond before circumstances demand a reaction. This is the difference between those who walk in spiritual authority and those who are constantly overwhelmed by life. One responds early, the other reacts late. Consider how often people look back at difficult situations and say, "I felt something before it happened." That feeling was not coincidence. It was a warning. It was God reaching out, offering guidance and protection. But recognizing it in hindsight does not change the outcome. The power lies in recognizing it in the moment and choosing to act on it immediately. Spiritual awareness is something that must be cultivated. It grows through prayer, through stillness, through a willingness to listen. In a world filled with noise and distraction, it becomes easy to overlook the voice of God. Yet His voice is often found in the quiet spaces, in those brief moments when your heart is stirred without explanation. Learning to recognize these moments is essential because they often carry more weight than we realize. There is also a responsibility that comes with recognizing God's warning. Awareness alone is not enough. It must lead to action. When you feel that nudge to pray, you pray. When you sense the need to pause, you pause. When something in your spirit tells you to draw closer to God, you do not delay. Every moment of obedience strengthens your connection with Him and sharpens your ability to discern His voice more clearly in the future. Ignoring these warnings, however, has consequences. Not because God is punishing, but because ignoring guidance leaves you unprepared. When you overlook a prompting to pray, you may miss the covering that prayer provides. When you dismiss a call to draw closer to God, you may face challenges without the spiritual strength you could have had. The cost of delay is often unseen until it becomes unavoidable. God's desire is always to guide, to protect, and to lead you into alignment with His purpose. His warnings are part of that guidance. They are evidence of His care and His involvement in your life. He does not leave you without direction. He does not allow things to happen without first giving you the opportunity to respond. But that opportunity must be recognized and embraced. The more you begin to take these moments seriously, the more you will notice them. What once felt like a vague impression will become a clear direction. What once seemed easy to ignore will carry a weight that demands your attention. Your spirit becomes more attuned, more responsive, more aligned with the movement of God. And in that alignment, you begin to walk differently. You become more prepared, more aware, more anchored. Situations that might have overwhelmed you no longer catch you off guard in the same way. Not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer walking through it without guidance. You are responding to God before circumstances force you to react. Delay often disguises itself as something harmless. It whispers, "Not now, later will be better," and it sounds reasonable, even wise. It doesn't present itself as disobedience. It presents itself as patience, as timing, as waiting for the right moment. But in the realm of the Spirit, delay can be far more dangerous than outright refusal, because it slowly dulls your sensitivity to God's voice while convincing you that you are still in control. When God speaks, He speaks with purpose and precision. His timing is never accidental. The moment you feel that inner prompting to pray, to pause, to step back, to move forward, that moment carries significance. It is aligned with something beyond what you can see. But when you delay, you step out of that alignment. You begin to operate according to your own timing instead of His. And even a small shift in timing can create a significant difference in outcome. Immediate obedience requires trust. It requires you to respond without having all the answers, without seeing the full picture, without knowing exactly why you feel what you feel. This is where many struggle. The mind seeks logic, clarity, and evidence, but the Spirit often calls for action before explanation. The longer you wait for everything to make sense, the more likely you are to miss the moment entirely. There is a spiritual momentum that comes with obedience. When you respond quickly to God's prompting, you step into a flow, an alignment where your actions connect with His movement. In that flow, things begin to shift, sometimes in ways you cannot immediately measure. But when you delay, that momentum is interrupted. What could have been simple becomes complicated. What could have been prevented becomes something you now have to endure. Delay also creates distance. Not physical distance, but spiritual distance. The more you ignore or postpone what God is asking you to do, the quieter His voice may seem. Not because He has stopped speaking, but because your attention has shifted. Your heart becomes occupied with other priorities, other concerns, other distractions. And slowly, what was once clear becomes faint. This is why immediate obedience is so powerful. It keeps your spirit sharp. It keeps your connection strong. Each time you respond without hesitation, you reinforce your sensitivity to God's voice. You train your spirit to recognize and act, not to question and postpone. Over time, this builds a pattern, a lifestyle of responsiveness that allows you to move in step with God more consistently. There is also an urgency that must be understood. Not every moment carries the same weight. Some promptings are routine, but others are critical. The challenge is that they may not feel different at first. A simple thought to pray, a quiet nudge to reach out to someone, an inner check that causes you to pause. These can seem small, but their impact can be significant. What you do in response to that small moment can influence something much larger than you realize. Many people only recognize the importance of these moments after the fact. They look back and see where they hesitated, where they delayed, where they chose comfort over obedience. And in that reflection, they realize that what felt like a minor decision was actually a pivotal one. This is why delay is dangerous. It hides the true weight of the moment until it has already passed. Obedience is rarely about convenience. It will often interrupt your plans, challenge your comfort, and require you to shift your focus. It may come when you are tired, distracted, or occupied with something else. But the question is not whether it fits into your schedule. The question is whether you are willing to prioritize God's voice above everything else in that moment. There is a discipline in responding immediately. It is not based on emotion, because emotions can fluctuate. It is based on commitment, a decision that when God prompts, you move. Even if it's a simple prayer, even if it's just a moment of stillness, even if it doesn't seem urgent from a natural perspective, you respond because you trust the one who is prompting you. As this becomes a habit, something begins to change within you. You become quicker to discern, quicker to act, less hesitant, less resistant. The internal debate that once slowed you down begins to fade. Instead of questioning whether you should respond, your default becomes obedience. And in that shift, you begin to experience a different level of spiritual clarity. Delay weakens that clarity. It introduces hesitation, doubt, and distraction. It creates space for other voices to compete for your attention. And over time, it can lead to missed opportunities. Moments where God was ready to move, but you were not ready to respond. The danger is not always immediate or obvious. It is often gradual. A postponed prayer here, an ignored prompting there, a moment of hesitation that seems insignificant. But these small delays accumulate. They shape your patterns, influence your sensitivity, and determine how you respond in more critical moments. Recognizing this changes how you approach every prompting. You begin to treat each one with greater seriousness, not out of fear, but out of understanding. You realize that obedience is not just about the action itself, but about staying aligned with God's timing and purpose in every moment. What you do in prayer today carries weight far beyond this moment. It is not just a spiritual routine or a religious habit. It is a decisive act that shapes what unfolds in your life tomorrow. Prayer is not passive. It is not merely words spoken into the air. It is engagement with the unseen, alignment with God's will, and participation in outcomes that have yet to manifest. Many people treat prayer as a response to problems rather than a preparation for them. They wait until something goes wrong, until pressure builds, until fear rises, and only then do they begin to pray with intensity. But by that time, they are often reacting instead of preparing. There is a difference between fighting a battle when it arrives and establishing strength before it ever reaches you. Prayer today positions you ahead of what is coming. The unseen realm is not bound by the same limitations as the physical world. What is prayed in one moment can influence events that have not yet taken place. This is why timing in prayer matters. When you feel prompted to pray now, it is often because something is being aligned, redirected, or even prevented in ways you cannot yet perceive. Your obedience in that moment connects you to a larger movement that extends beyond your immediate awareness. There is a tendency to underestimate the significance of a single prayer, especially when there is no immediate visible result. You may pray and then look around and see no change. Everything appears the same. But the absence of visible evidence does not mean the absence of impact. Much of what prayer accomplishes begins beneath the surface, in places you cannot measure with your senses. It is working in ways that only time will reveal. Consistency in prayer builds a foundation. Each moment you choose to pray, when you feel led, you are strengthening that foundation. You are creating spiritual stability that will support you when challenges arise. Without that foundation, even small difficulties can feel overwhelming. With it, you are able to stand with greater confidence, not because you see everything clearly, but because you have already positioned yourself through prayer. There are also moments when prayer acts as a form of protection, not always in ways that are obvious, but in subtle shifts that alter the course of events. A decision that turns out differently, a delay that prevents something harmful, an unexpected change that redirects your path. These moments often go unnoticed, yet they are part of how prayer shapes your tomorrow. You may never fully see what was avoided, but that does not diminish its importance. Prayer also aligns your hearts with God's direction. It brings clarity where there was confusion, peace where there was unrest, and focus where there was distraction. When you pray today, you are not only influencing external circumstances, but also preparing your inner state for what lies ahead. This internal alignment is just as critical as any external outcome, because how you respond to tomorrow is shaped by who you become today. Delaying prayer means delaying that alignment. It means stepping into tomorrow without the preparation that was available to you today. And when you enter situations unprepared, you are more likely to respond based on emotion, fear, or uncertainty rather than clarity and confidence. Prayer anchors you before the storm, not just in the middle of it. There is also a partnership in prayer. God invites you to participate, not because He is limited, but because relationship involves cooperation. When you pray, you are agreeing with His will, opening space for His movement, and positioning yourself within His purpose. This partnership is active, not passive. It requires engagement in the present moment, not postponement. Some of the most significant changes in life are the result of moments that seemed small at the time. A few minutes spent in sincere prayer. A decision to pause and seek God instead of rushing forward. A willingness to respond to that quiet prompting even when it feels inconvenient. These moments accumulate. They build momentum, and over time, they shape outcomes in ways that are far greater than their initial appearance. It is easy to become distracted by what is immediately visible and urgent. Daily responsibilities, pressures, and routines can push prayer to the background. It becomes something to fit in later, something to return to when there is more time. But the reality is that there will always be something competing for your attention. If prayer is not prioritized now, it will continue to be delayed. Understanding that prayer today determines your tomorrow changes that perspective. It elevates the importance of each moment you feel led to pray. It shifts prayer from being optional to being essential. It becomes less about convenience and more about alignment. Less about routine and more about readiness. You begin to see each prompting as an opportunity, not an interruption. An opportunity to influence what is ahead. An opportunity to strengthen your position. An opportunity to align with God's timing rather than your own. And as you respond to these opportunities consistently, you begin to experience a different level of preparedness. Tomorrow is not just something that happens. It is shaped in part by what you choose to do today. Every moment of prayer is a seed planted into what is yet to come. Some seeds take time to grow, but they carry within them the potential for significant change. Ignoring the opportunity to plant today limits what can be harvested later. The discipline of praying when prompted creates a rhythm that keeps you connected, aware, and aligned. It reduces the gap between when God speaks and when you respond. And in that reduced gap, there is greater clarity, greater direction, and greater readiness for whatever lies ahead. There are moments in your spiritual life when something shifts from routine to urgency. It is no longer just about maintaining a habit or following a schedule. It becomes a deep internal stirring that demands attention. You feel it in a way that is difficult to ignore. A weight, a pull, a sense that something requires immediate response. This is what it means to experience urgency in the spirit. It is not driven by panic, but by awareness. It is not confusion, but clarity that something significant is at hand. Many people are comfortable with casual spirituality. They pray when it fits, respond when it is convenient, and engage at a level that does not disrupt their normal flow of life. But urgency changes that. Urgency interrupts. It challenges comfort. It pushes you beyond routine into a place of intentional, focused response. And it is often in these moments that something powerful is waiting to be unlocked. Urgency in the spirit is closely connected to sensitivity. The more attuned you are to God's presence, the more quickly you recognize when something is different. What others might overlook, you begin to feel deeply. A simple moment becomes charged with meaning. A quiet prompting carries weight. And instead of brushing it aside, you recognize it as something that requires action. This urgency is not random. It is purposeful. It is often tied to moments where breakthrough is near, where change is possible, where something is about to shift. But breakthrough does not always happen automatically. It often requires participation. It requires a response that matches the moment. Urgency is the signal that now is the time to respond in a way that is intentional and focused. One of the challenges is that urgency can feel uncomfortable. It disrupts your plans. It calls you to step away from what you are doing and give your attention to something unseen. In a world that values productivity and visible results, responding to spiritual urgency can seem impractical. But the reality is that what happens in these unseen moments often carries more impact than what is visible. When you respond to urgency in the spirit, you are stepping into alignment with a specific moment. You are recognizing that timing matters. Just as there are seasons in the natural world, there are moments in the spiritual realm where action is required. Missing those moments can mean missing opportunities that may not come in the same way again. There is also an intensity that comes with urgency. It is not about doing more for the sake of activity, but about engaging more deeply. Your focus sharpens. Distractions lose their appeal. You become more intentional in your prayers, more aware of your thoughts, more aligned in your actions. This intensity creates an environment where things can shift more rapidly. Divine intervention is often associated with sudden change, moments where something beyond human ability takes place. But these moments are frequently connected to periods of focused, urgent response. It is not that urgency forces God to act, but that it positions you in a place where you are aligned with what He is already doing. It creates a connection between your response and His movement. There are times when people pray without urgency, and while those prayers still matter, they may lack the focus that certain moments require. Urgency concentrates your attention. It removes the casual approach and replaces it with intention. You are no longer dividing your focus between multiple things. You are fully engaged, fully present, fully responsive. This level of engagement often leads to clarity. As you lean into that urgent prompting, things begin to make more sense. Direction becomes clearer. Peace begins to replace uncertainty. What felt heavy starts to shift, not always instantly, but progressively as you remain engaged in that focused response. Ignoring urgency has its own consequences. When you feel that strong prompting and choose to dismiss it, you create distance between yourself and that moment. The intensity fades, the clarity diminishes, and what could have been a powerful point of connection becomes something you look back on with uncertainty. You may sense that something was there, but you did not fully engage with it. Responding to urgency, on the other hand, builds confidence. Each time you act on that prompting, you reinforce your ability to discern and respond. You begin to trust what you sense more readily. The hesitation that once held you back starts to lose its influence. You become more decisive, more aligned, more responsive. There is also a sense of partnership that develops. You are no longer passive in your spiritual life. You are actively engaged, aware that your response matters. Urgency becomes a signal that you are being invited into a moment that carries significance. It is an opportunity to step beyond routine and into something more dynamic. As this becomes part of your life, you begin to recognize patterns. You see how certain moments of urgency were connected to specific outcomes. You begin to understand that these were not isolated experiences, but part of a larger pattern of guidance and response. This awareness deepens your sensitivity and strengthens your willingness to act when urgency arises. Urgency in the spirit is not about living in constant intensity, but about recognizing when intensity is required. It is about being able to shift from routine to focus when the moment calls for it. It is about valuing those moments enough to respond without hesitation, without delay, without distraction. In those moments, your response becomes the key that unlocks what is waiting, not because of the action itself, but because of the alignment it represents. You are stepping into agreement with something greater, positioning yourself within a moment that carries the potential for change, movement, and breakthrough.